Our verse today will be taken from Luke chapter 1, from verse 67 to 80. And it says, His father Zechariah was filled with the Holy Spirit and prophesied, Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, because he has come and has redeemed his people. He has raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, as he said through his holy prophets of long ago. Salvation from our enemies and from the hand of all who hate us, to show mercy to our fathers and to remember his holy covenant, the oath he swore to our father Abraham, to rescue us from the hand of our enemies and to enable us to serve him without fear, in holiness and righteousness before him all our days. And you, my child, will be called a prophet of the Most High, for you will go on before the Lord to prepare the way for him, to give his people the knowledge of salvation through forgiveness of their sins, because of the tender mercy of our God, by which the rising sun will come to us from heaven, to shine on those living in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the path of peace. And the child grew and became strong in spirit, and he lived in the desert until he appeared publicly to Israel. This is the word of the Lord.
Thank you. For the Advent season, we are looking at the songs or the canticles of Luke. So Luke surrounds the birth of Jesus with 4 songs. Last week, we looked at Mary's song, and Jenny gave us a great overview of that song, sometimes known as the Magnificat. This week, we'll look at Zechariah's song. Next week, the kids will help us look at the angel's song. And then the final week, we'll look at Simeon's song. And the question we're wondering about is, how do these songs, as music sometimes does, how do these songs continue to resound? How do they continue to echo out? And we have this little bell that gives us a resounding. And how do these songs in Luke resound? How do they continue to echo out into our time? Well, let me introduce you to Zechariah's song this morning by asking you this question. Have you ever been lost? Anyone? A few? Oh, hey, I am not alone. Okay. So, a couple of pictures that I'll put up on the slide here. The first one, the one on the left, I did not take. It's somewhere in New Zealand as far as I know. Frodo and Sam, sorry, I got to... I really like The Lord of the Rings. You might know that. I have a friend who's living with us right now, Matt, right there, who had never seen Lord of the Rings. I'm like, you cannot live in my house without watching this movie. It's true. So this last couple weeks, we've been working our way through, and there's a scene in Lord of the Rings, that's this picture, where Frodo and Sam are going through a region called the Emyn, and it's a region of rocks and crags and valleys, and it's very depressing. And they just go around in circles. They can't find their way out. They are lost. And it's very depressing. Anyway, it's great watching with Matt. But the picture to the right is much more beautiful. I actually took that, but I'll tell you, I have no idea where I was when I took that. I don't know where that is. That is my water bottle, so that tells me that, I'm... But... So we got our maps together and we said, hey, let's hike this little route here. It starts off, we're going to hike the Jonas Pass, if you know where that is, and we're going to come out through the Nigel Pass. So you're going to start in the south end of Jasper National Park, and we're going to end up in the north end of Banff National Park. Like, that's the route, and it's kind of this. Now, pre-GPS, we had maps. We had a map of Jasper, we had a map of Banff, but the maps didn't quite join. Okay, there was a little piece that was like not there. Like about this much. How hard could it be, right? So we're like, no problem. So it turned out to be a problem. Actually, that little piece, like that much, we were really lost on day 2. You thought, well, we just follow this river and we'll get to where we need to go, except the path didn't follow the river. There was no path. And at a given point, we realized we have no idea where we are. And there may have been somebody, maybe me, who had a compass, but I'm pretty sure none of us knew how to use it. And we're like, we just don't really know. And we're just like wandering around aimlessly a little bit. We've got this river that's approximately going the direction we want to go, but there's no path by the river, so we're having to do a lot of cross-country hiking. We were just wandering aimlessly for about 10 hours. And we did get to the campsite. At a given point, though, we got to this river, and it was pretty clear we had to cross the river. It was about 30 feet across, and we're like, there's no bridge because we're not on a path. So we're rolling up our pants and wading through this river of very cold water. I don't like cold water, and I really don't like cold water up to my mid-thigh, and we're holding our packs up, and it was crazy. And we get to the campsite about 7 o'clock at night. We stumble in, which was a good thing. What was a really good thing was the guys who were at the campsite had baked brownies. And they, score. So, but it was, at the moment, as I think back to being lost, it was bewildering. And to be honest, it was a bit frightening. It's like, what are we going to do? Now, there's lots of ways to be lost. You can be lost in the mountains, like I was, or like Frodo and Sam. You can also be lost in life and just sort of be bewildered. Like, where am I? What is going on in my life? What's happening? What circumstances? What's happening out in the culture? And you just kind of lose your bearings. You're confused, you're bewildered, and you're just not quite sure where you are. And Zechariah, I think, was experiencing this kind of lostness. Now, I'm reading into the story a tiny bit, but consider that Zechariah had been married to Elizabeth for a long time. And we know from the story that they were, as most Jewish couples of that time would have imagined, you get married, you have children. They did not have children. And he'd been married for a long time, and they still did not have children. And I don't know that experience firsthand, but I have journeyed with friends who have struggled with infertility, and that is a difficult journey. And I have every reason to believe that it would have been for Zechariah. And it isn't just month after month. By this point in Zechariah's life, it's been year after year after year of disappointment. And feeling a little bit lost, like we don't have kids, like kids aren't coming anymore. But his larger context, he might have also felt lost, because Zechariah, like all Jews of that time, would have been waiting for the Messiah. And he would have been waiting his whole life for the Messiah. If you recall back to our Jeremiah series earlier this fall, Jeremiah is predicting that the Babylonians will come in and take over what is left of Israel, the southern nation of Judah, and invade. And since that time, 586 BC, it's been a series of occupying forces that have occupied Israel. So it was the Babylonians, that empire gave way to the Persians, that empire gave way to the Greeks, and that empire gave way to the Romans, who are currently in power in the time of Zechariah. So not only has Zechariah his whole life been under occupation, waiting for a Messiah, but so had the previous generations for 500-600 years almost. And the prophets had gone silent. As Jenny had pointed out last week, there's this 400-year period of silence between the last written prophet, Malachi, I believe, and the New Testament. And so you can imagine maybe Zechariah feeling lost, like what's going on? I don't know if he felt that as existentially daily, but I think he probably lived with some of that sense. And into this context, an angel appears to Zechariah and promises that he would, in his old age, he and his wife Elizabeth would have a son. And understandably, I think, Zechariah gives this really profound human response. Huh? Like, you can kind of appreciate, like, he's just lost. Like, what are you talking about? And he, I think somewhat understandably, didn't believe the angel promise, and he was struck speechless. He was confused, he was bewildered, maybe no longer sure of his bearings. Now you fast forward to the story that Soybe read for us, and this happens now. John, his son, so Elizabeth does get pregnant. She gives birth to a son. They are to name him John, and in the naming ceremony, there's a lot of confusion because they think they should call the son after the father, or maybe somebody in the father's immediate family, and that doesn't happen. They're insistent, as the angel had said, that he should be called John. And Zechariah, as you remember, can't speak. So he's motioning and he writes down, his name shall be John, and all of a sudden he gets words back. And the words back he gets is this song. And it's quite instructive if you listen to it. This is what he says after 9 months of not being able to talk. These are his words. And it's worth, just thinking a little bit about what it would be like to just listen for 9 months before we speak and what we'd say. And it's just, this is instructive. And there's a number of ways you could look at Zechariah's song. It's broadly speaking 2 big parts, but I'm going to break it into 3. I'm going to divide it into 3 sections, and you'll see why in a moment. So this first section that we'll look at, verses 68 to 75 of the song, speaks of great deliverance. Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, because he has come to his people, and he has redeemed them. He has raised up a horn of salvation. This is a poetic image. We're a little bit more dialed into poetry now. He's raised up a horn of salvation. This idea of he's raised up strength. A horn would be symbolizing a strong king. So he's raised up to us a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, as he said through his prophets long ago. A salvation from our enemies and from the hand of all who hate us, to show mercy to our ancestors and to remember his holy covenant. So God, what Zechariah is looking back on, is saying God has worked to rescue Israel in the past. He remembers his covenant. But notice that the salvation that Zechariah envisions in this song isn't just salvation from the enemies. So get rid of these Romans, get rid of these oppressors. These people are making life so miserable for us. That's probably embedded here. But notice he goes on to say, to rescue us from our enemies and to enable us to serve him without fear, to serve God without fear. And commentators are pretty agreed on this, that what's envisioned here is that salvation, the point of this salvation isn't just to rescue from these oppressors, but so that you can worship God freely. That's the point. And if you go back to the Exodus story, which I did this morning just to kind of refresh, it's exactly what God tells Moses to say to Pharaoh. Hey, let my people go so that we can worship God freely. That was the point of this rescue operation, so that we can serve and worship God freely. Now, there's multiple references at this point in the story to the Old Testament. We've already noted David, the covenant, prophets. He references Abraham. He's just steeped in these Old Testament stories. And he's looking back and saying, look at what God has done. These promises of deliverance that have come true. That God has operated in this way. But it's pretty clear in the story that although he's looking into the past and saying this is what God has done, he's kind of imagining then this is what God will do. The future comes into view. And that's the second, the second bookend. If you just see the bookends here. Picking up toward the tail end of the song. He speaks about the rising of the sun that will come to us from heaven to shine on those living in darkness in the shadow of death and to guide our feet into the path of peace. And likely it's a reference to Jesus coming, the rising of the sun, the coming of the light. And Jesus certainly picks up that imagery about himself. And it picks up prophecies in Isaiah about the people in darkness have seen a great light. And this light will shine. It'll illuminate the darkness. It'll help us see, and it'll guide our feet into peace. This is what God will do. Okay, so you see that in this song, Zechariah is not only looking to the past, this is what God has done, but he's looking to the future. This is what God will do, or maybe is doing. But this is the key thing I want you to notice this morning. Notice where he locates his son. And you, my child, verse 76, and you, my child, will be called a prophet of the Most High. You will go on before, for you will go on before the Lord to prepare a path for him, to give his people knowledge of salvation through the forgiveness of their sins, because of the tender mercy of our God. He places his son right in the middle of this story. And don't miss the significance of this. He's placing John right in the middle of what God is doing. John's life is captured and enfolded and encompassed by what God has done and what God is doing. John is written into God's story. James Houston, commenting on this, says, seeing ourselves from our own point of view becomes a prison. In contrast, seeing ourselves from the biblical perspective enlarges our horizons to the solemn grandeur of eternity. You can picture an old British man saying that. To the solemn grandeur of eternity. Without the Bible, the despair of a diminishing soul is the natural consequence. But what the Bible gives us here is it locates us. We're not lost. We are embedded in the story of God. That's what Zechariah is saying in this song. This song is sometimes referred to as the Benedictus. The Benedictus, good words, invites us to remember that God has been at work. And God will continue to work in history. And where we find ourselves is right in the midst of what God is doing. We can insert ourselves. There's room for another book or two there with your name on it. It's not just John that gets written into this story. You get written into this story. This is where you live, in the midst of what God has done and in the midst of what God is doing. And you might not see it super clearly, any more than Zechariah saw it clearly until this song. But God has been faithful. I was just listening to the songs we were singing this morning. That's what we're singing about. That's why we gather. And it was just a delight to hear you sing these songs. God has been faithful. God will be faithful. And you live in the midst of that. You've been written into that story. You're not lost. Now let me just for a moment try and land this for you. A few of you know this. A friend of mine passed away this week. So this is one of my best friends in high school. I can't think of any high school adventure. We had quite a few. I can't think of any high school adventure that doesn't include my friend Phil. He was part of it all. And after high school, we stayed in touch for a few years, but you drift apart. There was no falling out or anything. I moved. He got onto other things. We didn't stay in touch super well, certainly not beyond university days. And I only just got back in touch with him in the last, 2 weeks ago. I was called back in through his brother. He alerted me that Phil is dying. He had late-stage cancer. And so I had the privilege of visiting with Phil 3 times. I was his last visitor a week ago today. I went to see him Sunday evening, and he passed away this Monday morning. And I'm not going to tell you, I feel a little lost. I find myself staring out the window aimlessly and kind of like, I just don't quite know what to do with myself right now. I'm really tired. Like, it's grief. I get it. And I'm trying to pinpoint like the lostness, and part of it is I feel lost a little bit because it all happened so quickly. I mean, he was at work in September and he passed away in December. It's just, cancer can do that. It's very sad. Part of my lostness, I think, is like he turned 57 in November. I'm 57. Like, he's like literally my contemporary. And I'm like, oh, it just kind of puts mortality into a different light. And I'm like, oh, okay. Part of it is regret, not reaching out to him sooner. Lots of great stories. We were able to reminisce. I pulled out a bunch of pictures. I could regale you with crazy stories. There was a crazy period in my life. It included Phil. He was my only Christian friend in high school. That was a part of it too. We used to, like, Bow Valley Church just down the road, used to be the Calgary Christian Center. Anyone remember that? We used to go every Wednesday to Youth Explosion. Like 1,000 kids at that. I just recognized that he just helped guide me through Phil was just a friend. He was my Sam. If I were Frodo, he just was that guy in my life. And so it was, it's been, but here's the thing, reflecting on this story is that I'm not completely lost. I'm not saying it's still grief. I'm not trying to wash over that with some kind of spiritual veneer. But I recognize that Phil's story existed in a larger story, and it did. And it matters that it did. And my story as I journeyed with Phil in his last days, and now as this afternoon I'll go sit with his brother and his brother's wife and a few others. We'll have a memorial meal for Phil. To remember this all happens in a larger story. It's embedded somewhere. God has been faithful. There's all kinds of stories, both scriptural stories and personal stories we can look to that says this is true. God has shown up here and here and here and here. And then we believe that God will show up again. And in the midst of that, that's where Phil lives. And that's where I live. Right? This isn't just kind of like a cute way of reading scripture. This will hold you. When life is hard and bewildering and you just feel a bit lost. One last little detail about the Benedictus is that traditionally in the church, the Benedictus is a morning prayer. It's like when you think of morning and afternoon and evening and nighttime prayers, where the Benedictus shows up in the prayer book of the church is as a morning prayer. And I just invite you, I ask you, what it would be like to begin your day this way. And I mean, you could literally read the Benedictus. You're welcome to do that, and there's way worse practices than that. That'd be great. But what I'm actually poking at is, what about just beginning the day remembering where you are? That you live embedded in God's story. That God's faithfulness has been in the past, and God's faithfulness will hold you in the future, and this is where you live, here. And what if we began our day with that prayer? This has just been comforting for me this week, just to recognize that I'm not actually completely lost. I have some bearing. I have a bit of a compass, and I'm learning how to read it. So I leave it with you. I hope what you hear isn't just sort of we all carry heavy things. I'm not trying to, you feel like that's not the point of the story. I think the point of the story is that we're held in and we exist in a larger story. Hear that. As we have been this series, it's only been 1 week prior to this one, but as we are going to be doing, you might be aware that we had several poetry workshops in the fall, and out of that came a series of poems that were built around these songs. That was the poetry prompt that Cliff gave us. And a number of people wrote poems about Mary or Zechariah or Simeon or the angels. And we're just going to invite, those poems will become available to you during the Christmas season. We'll have a booklet available for you to sit with poems from the community about these songs for you to just reflect on during Christmas, like Christmas season, like Christmas Day through Epiphany, through early January. That's coming. But this morning, I'm just going to invite you to hear one of these poems from Kevin. So I'm going to invite Kevin up. I'm going to invite the band to come forward as well, because they're going to sing a song after this. And while they just get kind of settled here, let me pray as we make this transition. God, thank you that where we find ourselves maybe sometimes a bit bewildered, a bit lost, a bit unsure. Turns out we're not lost. We, like John, have been written into your story. And the faithfulness that has gone before and your faithfulness that will carry us in the days to come actually hold us. You hold us. So thank you for this orientation this morning, this orientation point, this fixed point. In Christ's name.